generally that Canada has been a very strong supporter. It's on record, they've been a very strong supporter of the inter-American human rights system. Financially, the numbers back it up. I mean, Canada has given millions of dollars. And if you actually go back, the proof of the pudding is in the resolutions over the last 5 years. So I think it's easier to definitively talk about on a political level, what have we done? And we can see that Canada has supported all those political resolutions over the years. As a rule, all member states do not get involved in the cases before the Commission and the Court. So therefore, not only would Canada have no place to even comment on an issue between the state of Chile and the Commission, but likewise, Chile would never weigh in and discuss what they felt was discussion between the Inter-American Commission and Canada. How's that for a diplomatic response?
Probably everybody knows that, but just in case not everybody knows it, that maybe to situate Canada into the Inter-American system very quickly, like we're not in front of the court because we're not.
Yeah, I mentioned that okay, because we're not. Yeah, so we're not. So it's kind of a two category system where you have 23 member states of the 34 active OAS member states, 23 of them have signed the convention, and the other 11 have either not signed it or have rescinded their support to the convention. If they've signed the convention, it means that all the member states recognize the Commission as a human rights body, and the difference is those 23 that have signed the convention have also recognized the jurisdiction of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in Costa Rica, which means if a case goes not their way, a state's way in the Commission, it can be, I won't use the word appeal because that's the wrong terminology in legal language, but it can be moved to a different level in order to continue, and so, but we participate in the Commission.
Hi, I'm Doug. I'm also from Carleton, so.
There you go. Solidarity.
Good presentation. I'm also from Barbados, Barbados is one of the 11 countries within the Commonwealth Caribbean with still having very discriminatory laws against sexual minority. So I kind of have many questions. I'll try to condense it. And so I kind of have a question in terms of the Commonwealth Caribbean is sort of like the last frontiers in terms of the America. I notice there's a lot of emphasis on Latin America, not so much emphasis on the Caribbean, but the Caribbean is actually the last frontier in terms of discriminatory laws against sexual minorities. So what is happening to move efforts in terms of that direction? And to sort of annex another part to earlier colleague's question, how does, in light of the 2013 ruling by the Indian Supreme Court, and when I went through that ruling, and not being a lawyer, but just from a layman's point of view, what seemed to be pervasive in terms of the argument by the court is that the Delhi High Court relied heavily on jurisdictions here, rulings in other jurisdictions to be able to come to their conclusion that Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code violated their constitution. And within that context, and within a context where you see in some regions of Dublin, now, how does the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, I was trying to see if India was actually a member. I'm not sure if I picked up, but how, because you said that the court's ruling, is kind of limited to the country that for which you're ruling, but then how does the court or how does the commission get more, for lack of a better word, strength so that a lot of those rulings can be applicable in other jurisdictions?
Oh, that's, thank
Sorry.
you so much. But I'll try to just separate the issues. So one is that there is this noticeable separation, a schism that has arisen in the Americas between the 11 Commonwealth Caribbean countries. That there are 12 Caribbean countries, because Bahamas is also a Caribbean Commonwealth country, which
In Haiti.
it's not common. Is it Haiti? Is Haiti
No, but
Commonwealth?
no,
I'm
CARICOM.
right, but I'm not talking about CARICOM.
Okay.
We're getting all these, yeah. But Bahamas, interestingly enough, had sodomy laws and rescinded them about 10 years ago. So it's the other 11
But they
countries.
do discriminate as it relates to the assignment of punishment for sexual offenses in
Right.
public areas. The sexual offense, the offense for or the punishment for same-sex public display of intimacy is much harsher than for heterosexual
Right.
display of intimacy.
So I will, again, not getting into specific examples of who is doing what and who is not doing what. I would just generally make the comment that what has emerged, interestingly, in the hemisphere over the last 10 years has been this, this division. So you have North America and Latin America that have moved towards decriminalization and a lot of that support for LGBT issues. And you see almost, well, you see this different group. And this other group, it's interesting because when I first arrived at the OAS, I tended to see things in black and white, and I couldn't see the shades of gray. And so it was, you know, people would make these stereotypical comments, and they would say all people from the Caribbean are homophobic, and all these Latin American countries are now liberal in their against, you know, homophobic laws and that sort of thing. And meanwhile, I was living in Washington through the whole debate of same-sex marriage, and so it was interesting to see certain countries getting up or having concerns about other countries' positions without looking in their own backyards and saying that they actually had challenges themselves. So I think we all have to be really generous in the hemisphere and not make stereotypes about different divisions that are taking place. And also, once I was able to kind of see through the haze, because I've been there for 3.5 years, I was able to have more one-on-one discussions with my colleagues in different countries who are saying, you know, we're actually trying to do certain things here, and this is how we're doing it. Because, and this is what I'm trying to get at in my research on human rights diplomacy, is so much of it is perception and perspective and really not being able to support change coming from within, because there's been a sensitivity in the Caribbean, I think, of outsiders coming in and saying, this is our values, and so this creates a counter discourse and a wall goes up. And so what I'm hoping is through more of these types of debates that there is going to be a broader discussion. Now, I would encourage you also on the IACHR.org website to go to the list of the commissioners. There are 7 commissioners, one of whom is a law professor from the University of West Indies in Jamaica, in Kingston, in Mona. Her name is Tracy Robinson. She's one of the commissioners. And in my discussions with her, she has told me about kind of in-country and within the region, there have been initiatives that have come up. For example, in Belize, there's a lawsuit that's taking place at the moment where people have been within Belize are they're litigating and they're taking these cases to a very high level. In my discussions with people in the Caribbean, they're hoping that, I think they're seeing that the change needs to come from within people within each of those countries saying this has to change, rather than being externally directed criticism. And then finally, on the last point on the sodomy laws, this is a whole other conversation, but some of the research I've read has stated that, well, there are sodomy laws in the Indian subcontinent, there are sodomy laws in Africa, and there are sodomy laws in the Caribbean. And although they all do have origins in British penal law from the 19th century, apparently you can't compare apples and oranges, and some of them are very different. So I don't know to what extent we can draw those connections, but it would be interesting to hear from a common law, Commonwealth scholar on whether there are potentials for case law jurisprudence in that area, and whether that does make an impact from one previously colonized country to another.
Hi, Doug. I'm Kim Inksader.
Hi.
I had a meeting last year, I guess, at the embassy. And most of my work in Latin America is at the national level, so with national human rights institutions, the Defensa, etc. And I would say, from my perspective, that they've played a really critical role in promoting equality rights for LGBT, at least from my experience from late 90s or at least 2000. And I wonder if you see their influence in the inter-American system when you were reviewing the different precautionary measures and hearings, etc.
It's interesting, and I would defer more to my colleague Keith there, who works at the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and hear what his perspective is, because my understanding is that, and the acronym is NHRI's, National Human Rights Institutions, which is more, my understanding is it's more of a UN networking terminology, and that it doesn't have as much, I haven't come in contact with that network as much in Washington through the Inter-American Human Rights System. I've talked to some people who've said that the NHRIs tend to be more active within the UN human rights system, whereas the Inter-American Commission tends to be much more, it's historical. It's the Commission started in the early 60s during all the dictatorships in Latin America, and so there's been this allegiance in Latin America to the Commission, the veneration. It's a venerated independent institution, and when the institution is criticized, Latin Americans, this is on the front page of newspapers in Latin America, even though Canada and the U.S. are not on the same radar screen when it comes to the human rights system. So I would say that it's hard for me to say what impact, and I have heard some mixed reviews of human rights institutions in Latin America in specific countries. I've heard some people say, wow, these are really strong and they're really promoting the rights. I've heard others criticize and say they're not doing enough. And so people have gone to the Commission because they know that the Commission is there. And this creates, unfortunately, a situation where the Commission becomes very weighed down with the weight and the burden of so many human rights issues in Latin America.
I think I've seen some fairly significant complaint resolution nationally.
Great.
By the National Human Rights Institutions.
That's good to know.
So if they're resolving them, then they're not getting to the Commission.
Right, so that's good news then. That's great.
Is that it? No? Other questions?
Christine.
Christine Kelly. Thanks a lot, Doug. That was great. I think the case of Italia is really fascinating, and probably a lot of what happened there had to do with her position and resources and knowledge that she knew that this other option was available once the Supreme Court ruled against her. But I'm just thinking about how long it took, and I'm wondering, is that just bureaucracy, or was there some resistance to compliance, or was there some stalling going on there because Chile didn't want to listen to the higher court?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would have to talk to someone in Chile from the government to get their perspective. Again, I will say generally that the inter-American human rights system is a victim of its own success. It's because it's so venerated, as I say, and because it's so well respected